Good morning. So I'm just trying to make sure that the live stream is actually on, which it appears to be. So Psalm 16 is the psalm that some of us will have read this morning in our Old Testament in a year at St John's, and verses 9 and 10 stood out to me. I don't know if they did to you. It says, David writes, "Therefore my heart is glad and my tongue rejoices. My body also will rest secure, because you will not abandon me to the grave, nor will you let your Holy One see decay." Well, how can those things be true, we might think, when clearly people are dying, Christians are dying, presumably. We may well know people or friends of friends, and that will increasingly be the case. We may fear what might happen to us. We may feel that everything is generally falling apart. How can these promises of security that we find in the Bible when we trust in Jesus, how can they possibly make sense in a situation like this? Well, as I read that this morning, my mind was moved to John 11 verse 4. Jesus has heard that Lazarus, his friend, is ill, and so he says this. When he heard this, Jesus said, "This sickness will not end in death." What an extraordinary thing to say. And indeed, even more when we read on in the chapter and find that actually, no, Lazarus does die. What's going on there? This is extraordinary. But what we then find is that Jesus brings Lazarus out of the grave in order to show that he is the resurrection and the life. And so when we put our trust in him, we can know in the face of death and in the face of sin and in the face of all that stands between us and God, we have real hope in the face of all these things, because Jesus has conquered death and risen to life again. So it is true now that the way that we do life has to change for a season at least. Maybe cherished hopes, dreams, plans, holidays, livelihoods even may need to change. We may fear even death itself, whether that's for ourselves or for those we love. Has God failed? Has he forgotten us? Well, no, it turns out he's already dealt with our deepest problem, the very deepest problem that we face. It should be no surprise to us that death is real, but we so often prefer to think that it isn't. But even that worst enemy that we don't want to face has been defeated. Jesus is the resurrection and the life. God is a God of resurrection. And so that means that fear, and sin, frustration, and death never have the last word.